Hey everyone, and welcome to another Heroes and Bosses video. This time I'll be speed painting the Ur-Ghuls from Blackstone Fortress, the new futuristic dungeon crawler from Games Workshop. The first thing I'm going to do is flatten out the base a bit. Not perfectly flat, but just a bit smoother. Next I'm using a bit of vallejo putty to fill in the gaps. Regular green stuff is much better for this, since vallejo putty shrinks after it dries. But this stuff does dry much faster, and I can add rocks or mud later if there's anything obvious that needs to be concealed. Once the putty dries, I'm giving these guys a two-tone prime. Chaos black from below the miniature, and then Corax white from a 45-degree angle above the miniature. After that, I just painted the base with some vallejo black brush-on primer. Next, I'm making up two custom skin tones. Both are going to start off with a bit of Calgar Blue. For the first one, I'm mixing in a bit of Khardic Flesh from P3. I want to keep the color blue, but I'm just desaturating it a bit with the flesh color. Next, I'm doing the same thing with Ryn Flesh to create a nice, bright pale blue. So here you can see that the sky is black underneath and grayish white on top, and these colors are going to be the guide for where my paint goes. Everywhere that's black is getting painted with the darker blue color. Now if you have an airbrush, you can really take advantage of this zenithal prime effect, but as I said, I'm only using the black and the white as a guide. Even though you can still see that black through the blue skin tone on the first coat, I'm just leaving it for now. All four miniatures are getting a single coat of the dark blue in the places where the sun don't shine. Once all the dark areas are covered in one layer of the dark skin tone, I'm moving on to the lighter one and covering all the white primed areas. Now that they all have two colors on them, it's time to go back and do it all again one more time, but with one difference. As I go, I'll be wet blending the edges where the two colors meet. These colors are similar enough that even if you mess it up, it won't be super noticeable. So if you're new to wet blending, this is a good model to practice on. So as I said, this is the second coat of both colors being added, and then I'm just going to be muddling the two colors together right on the miniature where they meet. So here's how the ghouls are looking so far. It's hard to tell under my studio lights, but there's a definite shaded area on the underside of the miniatures, and that's going to save time on any highlighting later. Next I want to bring out all the little details in these guys, and I'm going to use Nuln Oil Gloss for that. There's a few reasons why I'm using gloss over the normal version. First, this one doesn't adhere as well to the miniature, so it's going to reduce the amount of cleaning up and highlighting that I need to do later on the flat surfaces. I've already created some shadow, and now I just want some definition, and gloss is a bit better for getting into small places and darkening them. You can, of course, use regular Nuln Oil or some other dark wash, and then just use a damp brush right after to clean up any pooling that you might get on the top surfaces of the muscles. This will create essentially the same effect that I'm going for right now. Once the miniature is entirely covered, I'm just looking it over for excess pooling and dabbing that up with the end of a damp brush. Now I'm using a wet palette, so I still have my two blue skin colors on there. I'm just going to do a little touch up to the topmost muscles and to the top of the head using the lighter color. I'll use the darker color on places like the abs and the pecs. Basically just repainting spots that I want to stand out or to clean up. You can of course add a bit of white to each one if you want to do some more pronounced highlights. Next I'm going to do the teeth with some Screaming Skull. The teeth are super tiny, so I'm pretty much just lightly dabbing the paint onto them. Next I'm going to give the hands and parts of the face a fleshy look. To do this I'm going to be using two skin tones from P3, Khardic Flesh and Iridian Flesh. And then I'm going to thin these down to a glaze with a medium rather than water. I find this helps, preventing too much of the paint pooling into recesses like a wash. I'm starting with a darker skin tone and marking out the areas on the hands and arms that I want to look like flesh. I'm also starting on the hand or close to it with the first brush strokes so I don't get a harsh line between the blue and the brownish skin color. If you do get that, just feather it out with a damp brush. The thin paint is also going to preserve the shading from the Nuln Oil, and I'm fine with some of the blue skin tone showing through this layer of flesh. Now I'm switching to the lighter skin tone, the Khardic Flesh, and I'm highlighting the brighter areas, such as the palms, the sides of the fingers, and the wrists. Now I'm doing the same thing with the face, and this is a way you can make each figure a bit unique. I'm going to create a slightly different flesh pattern on the face of each ghoul. So here I'm starting off with the darker tone, and I'm painting over the eye area as well as the mouth. Then once again I'm switching to the lighter Khardic Flesh, and I'm doing a quick highlight on the ridge of the forehead and the lips. And finally I wanted to add some skin blemishes using the same colors. I'm using Iridian Flesh to randomly mark some spots on the back of the shoulders, and then I'm going to color in the centers of each of these spots using Khardic Flesh. Now that the ghouls are done, it's time for the base. I'm using 3 different colors for the base in an attempt to make it match some of the tiles in the game. I'm mixing 1 drop of slow dry and a drop or 2 of medium with each of the colors on the wet palette. This is going to give me some time to play with these colors on the base. This isn't necessary, however, you'll just have to work faster than me. So the first step is to repaint the entire base with a thin layer of Abaddon Black. Before that has time to dry, I'm switching to Sotek Green and marking out a thick line somewhere on the base. I'm going to keep adding this until it's bright and noticeable, and then I'm going to rinse off my brush and feather the green back into the black along the edges so that the 2 colors fade together. And finally I'm using Calgar Blue and making a bright line down the center. I'm just dabbing this into the Sotek Green and making a brighter streak up the middle. And just like before, use a damp brush to feather the edges together, and then repeat this process until you're happy with the brightness of the color. And the final step before everything gets sprayed with a matte varnish is to paint the entire rim with the color of your choice. I'm just going to go with some Abaddon Black. And here they are, ready to create mayhem in Blackstone Fortress. As always, a special thank you to all my patrons for supporting these videos. If you want to be part of our community and help decide which miniatures get painted, come check us out on Patreon. There's a lot more Blackstone Fortress coming, so if this interests you, be sure to hit the bell and turn on notifications from this channel. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching.